Thank you very much, Mark, and good morning once again, everybody. I can't say it's a pleasure to be able to stand up here and talk about Beet Moth, but it is very important, and I am pleased to be able to show you the work we're going to be doing. So I know it's probably been less of an issue up here in this part of the world, but for those of you growing further south in the area, Beet Moth has become an established pest. So you can now start seeing these distinctive symptoms quite commonly, where the heart leaves are being attacked, and we are now taking this issue very seriously. So it's gone from sort of a sporadic emerging pest to fairly well established across the beet growing area. So today with the help of Eleanor, we're going to be sharing with you our research strategy and give you those timescales for the research and when some answers will start becoming available. So beet moth is a very new pest in the UK, only recently recorded around 10 years ago on our wild sea beet populations, and that's where it stayed for quite a while. 2020 was when the first case came into us at BBRO at the plant clinic, and given the symptoms, it was diagnosed as boron deficiency. And really, not a lot of damage was seen back in 2020. Of course, we had the back of a bit of drought, a lot of virus yellows, and some cercospora. So there were lots of issues in those crops. Really, the first significant infestations set in 2022, and that's when we first saw this problem developing. Our monitoring efforts in 2023 and 24, we thought something was not going right because the season wasn't conducive to beet moth, and we didn't actually catch many on these cards with the pheromone lures. This was actually the most severely infested one at that time. Then, cut forward to this year, and just a show of hands for anyone that did have a beet moth issue. Yeah, there's a few of you. So we saw far more hands go up at Norwich, but I think that's unsurprising given the amount of drought that was seen in that part of the country. But that's when we first had serious concerns about beet moth in 2025, and with the support of NFU Sugar and British Sugar, BBRO helped gain that EA for Coragen, which was granted on the 4th of July to give you some options for control. We also invested in a range of smart AI-driven traps that Eleanor will tell you a bit more about in a bit, and we really upped our monitoring efforts because good monitoring is the key to good control. Why was 2025 such a good year? I don't think I need to remind you of the drought, but as you can see, the Met Office have reminded us very low levels of rain, and it was warmer than average. 24 and 23, yes, you could find beet moth in crops, but it wasn't doing significant levels of damage. It was sort of ticking over. And then back to 22, again, another dry and warmish spring, conducive to beet moth colonizing the plants. Last year, we issued our beet moth guide, and the primary author is here. And this pulled together all the information we knew of at the time. And I think it raised probably as many questions as answers we could give. But it is a very under-researched pest. It's a sporadic pest across Europe as well, so we are still in the stages of trying to gain some of these answers. What we did in collaboration with some of the British Sugar ag managers, Richard Smart particularly, came up with this 1 to 5 scale, so you can start looking at damage and monitoring how far it's progressing. But it does look like when you're starting to see severe levels of damage, there's not a lot you can do. You can then think about harvesting earlier, because these beet will not put on more yield if they've lost all their crown, like a 4 or a 5, and they also won't store so well over winter. But this is where our strategy of research comes into play. So this was signed off by the board of BBRO a couple of weeks ago, and we're focusing in these 4 key areas. So gaining more of an understanding about the life cycle and the behavior of the moths. There's a lot of unknown questions there. Pushing our trapping and monitoring efforts even harder, looking at cultural management, and then finally chemical control. So Eleanor, I'll hand over to you now. There's the pointer, to give you some more information about some of these key stages we're looking at.
Have a mic?
I think you're on it.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start to talk you through some of the bits we've started going forward with and some things that we're going to be doing in the coming year to start to have a look at tackling beet moth for you in your area. So to start with, we need to have a look at the life cycle and the behaviour of the moth, because it's quite a new pest to the UK. We don't know much about that yet. So we need to start getting some of the fundamental basics in place so that we can then move forward with what we can do to try and target them and deal with infections in the crop. So we're going to team up with Ferrer on this one, which is really good news. So they're going to help us having a look at the life cycle and working out how long each of those stages take, and then that will later inform some May spray decisions and cultural control. We need to have a look at egg laying. We haven't been able to find the eggs yet, so that's something we need to look at and think about when we're spraying for that. We will also be doing a set of paired traps to look at egress and ingress into the crop. So there'll be a trap in a field that was previously beet, and then the following field will be one going into beet in the next season, to look at whether the moths are coming out of that first field and moving into the second, or if they're just migrating in, and how that relationship happens year on year. Trapping and monitoring is going to be a big part of what we're doing, and this is a main part we've already started. So as Alistair touched on, we had these X-Farm traps set up last year. There's an example of one on the corner of the stage here for you. So this is an automated trap with a pheromone lure in it that attracts in the moths, and then from that we can start working out how many are in the area and where they're moving during the season. They will be rolled out on our 20 crop watch sites this year. Those sites will also have yield assessments to look at the impact of the damage and how much it's affecting the crop. In and amongst the gaps of the crop watch network, we'll have some more moth traps, which we're branding up as our moth watch network. So they will hopefully give us a wider picture and a lot more detail of where the moths are and how relative numbers are to each other. All of this trapping will be occurring much earlier, so we can see very first infection in the crop early on, and then how numbers are building throughout the season, and if we're seeing these peaks and troughs of different generations. There will be in-crop monitoring of adults and caterpillars, so maybe we can see when caterpillar numbers are peaking and if moths follow afterwards, and how that relationship works in our climate. And again, teamed up with Ferrer, we'll be looking for a diagnostic to try and identify the moths. This is an example of one of our X-Farm traps out in the field. You can see one of the older Delta Farm traps in the background, the red triangle trap. So these have really made a massive difference this year to our trapping. So this is an example of the picture that we received from the trap. So there's a sticky roll inside that rolls around every couple of days, and then a camera on the top takes an automatic photo. And then the green boxes around the moths on here are ones that have been identified by the AI, which we've been training. And then the little orange ones in the corner down here are ones that didn't quite get right that I've added on later, validating them. So we're going to continue to train that and hopefully speed up our trapping process. This is what you can hope to see from those traps. So there's a heat map here showing how many moths we're catching in your area and whereabouts they are. And then at the end of the season, we get a nice big graph like these two here, which shows exactly how many were caught and when those peaks and troughs were, so we can start putting that together with some of the life cycle work and the in-crop monitoring to see exactly what the moths are doing. On to cultural management, we want to have a look at the overwintering fate of the pupae to see where they're going over winter and then the impact they're going to have the following year. There's lots of information about ploughing possibly helping, so we've set up a little trial to have a look at that using some emergence traps to see whether if you're ploughing down in between, maybe we can try and minimise the effect of beet moth the following year. And then moving forward, we'd like to have a look at some plant extracts, and we'll be looking at the impact of variety on damage as well. This is an example of one of our emergence traps. Looks a little bit like it's landed from space. So this is a net tent with one of these X-Farm traps inside. So this one I actually set up before Christmas to check their durability. So it survived storms, snow, and the full Christmas break. So these will be going out rolling forward to monitor the emergence of the moths into the following crop. And now I'll hand you back over to Alistair, who's going to talk a bit about chemical control.
Thank you, Eleanor. So finally, of course, we need to look at chemical control in that IPM triangle I looked at earlier. Of course, chemical control sits at the top and as our last means of control, but of course, you might well need to look at it. Options for control on the market at the moment are very limited. So we are going to look at a whole range of new and novel products, working with the chemical manufacturers. We're also looking at some novel ways of controlling as well. So with a startup based down at Rothamsted, looking at enhancing our pheromones, and actually can you draw in the male moths from a large area and actually therefore effectively make the females sterile. So that's quite exciting. Commonly used in controlled environments, but not being used out in the field yet. So that could work. And we're also looking at biological control agents. The benefit here being that these larvae will burrow into the petioles and hide away from conventional chemistry. Whereas you put a biological, say a nematode or some fungi or bacteria in there, they'll actively seek out a host. So we're going to look at all those options as well. So as you can see, it's a huge amount of work and there are a lot of questions to answer, but we can't obviously rest on our laurels and have another year with limited options like we saw last year. So it's a significant investment, the project value in the region of around about £200,000. And this is sort of the timescale for delivery of that information. So some of this work will take 2 or 3 seasons, and we will need seasons where beet moth are prevalent. But going forward into 2026, we continue to support our colleagues at NFU Sugar and British Sugar to look for new options for chemicals. And then 2027 and 2028 is when we're going to start seeing on-farm findings come to fruition. The work that we've secured with FERA will be completed by the end of this year, as long as it all goes to plan. And then moving forward, hopefully in 3 years' time, I'll be able to stand on this stage and actually roll out a full integrated management plan for beet moth. So that's all we have to say on beet moth at the moment. It is a case of watch this space, but I hope you can appreciate we are taking this issue very seriously at BBRO.